to this session on Fieldwork Practicum in the first semester of BSWG program. BSWG program has one Fieldwork Practicum in the first semester, which is BSWL 104. In BSWL 104, there are 25 days of fieldwork. A learner who is enrolled for this program needs to do this fieldwork practicum within the first semester of this program. So there are 25 days of fieldwork during the first semester. It consists of 5 individual conferences and 20 orientation visits in 20 different fieldwork settings. Now, fieldwork under BSWL 104 has to be conducted under the guidance of a professionally qualified social worker. The coordinator of the study center will provide the learners with an appropriate guide or fieldwork supervisor. Completion of fieldwork in BSWG first semester is mandatory before starting fieldwork practicum for the second semester, and so on and so forth. But learner may appear for the term end examination without completing the fieldwork practicum. In BSWG, learner has the opportunity to complete the course within a maximum period of 6 years, and the minimum period is 3 years. So if we look into the fieldwork practicum journal, which is provided to the learners, the first page is the face sheet. Face sheet is a very important document. It consists the profile of the student. The learner has to write in detail about himself, the name, enrollment number, the regional center, the address of the study center, and also the name and address of the agency where the learner is undergoing the fieldwork. Also the name and address of the fieldwork supervisor and contact details of the fieldwork supervisor. Fieldwork practicum journal is a very important document, and it has to be kept very preciously in a safe place. It is advised that a separate personal diary is kept by the learner while doing the fieldwork. The learner may write important notings while conducting the fieldwork in the personal diary, and after the fieldwork of that particular day, the learner may start writing the fieldwork journal or the report of that particular day. So it is also suggested to keep a photocopy of the journal before the final submission. In case of an unforeseen event, if there is any loss of the fieldwork journal, it is advisable that the learner keeps a photocopy of the journal. And also it is advisable to keep a acknowledgement slip after submission of the fieldwork journal. The journal is to be submitted to Student Evaluation Division by the Regional Center along with the evaluation proforma, which is submitted by the supervisor. Let us come back again to the fieldwork practicum journal. After the learner finishes the face sheet, there is another face sheet which includes the details of the fieldwork supervisor. It provides the profile of the supervisor, the name of the supervisor, from where the supervisor has completed the MSW degree, how long the supervisor is supervising in IGNOU, the BSW, the students, and what is the qualification of the supervisor. So these kind of detailed information has to be provided by the fieldwork supervisor in the profile of the supervisor. Thereafter, fieldwork practicum provides the certificate. This certificate is to be provided by the fieldwork supervisor. So it clearly states that the supervisor has supervised the learner and he has adequately guided the learner for completion of 5 individual conferences and 20 orientation visits, and this certificate has to be provided by the supervisor. It has to be signed. Coming to the next component of the fieldwork journal, we have provided detailed guideline about how to go about the fieldwork. So once the student enrolls for the program, the student will be meeting the study center coordinator for allotment of fieldwork supervisor. Fieldwork supervisor will conduct an induction meeting. Induction meeting will be conducted in the study center and where detailed information will be provided by the supervisor as to how to go about fieldwork during that semester. And once the induction meeting happens, the learner has to write the report of the individual conference. Individual conference is the one-to-one meeting that happens between the learner and the fieldwork supervisor. So space is provided in the fieldwork practicum journal. The report has to be written there. Then in the fieldwork BSWL 104, the first 5 orientation visits has to be conducted. The supervisor will help the student select fieldwork agencies or settings where the learner can do the orientation visits. Initially, 5 orientation visits needs to be done in 5 different settings, and thereafter the reports of the 5 orientation visits may be written. Then the learner meets the supervisor for the individual conference and write the discussion that is happening between the learner and the supervisor. It is very important for the learner to note that all the queries related to fieldwork practicum has to be discussed in detail by the learner in these individual conferences. After the individual conference, second, the orientation visits of 6 to 10 has to be completed, and again reports has to be written and individual conference has to be done. So in this way, 5 individual conferences has to be completed and 20 orientation visits in 20 different settings has to be completed. After the final individual conference, the fieldwork journal has to be submitted to the fieldwork supervisor for final correction. There are certain guidelines for the learners which are also given in detail in the fieldwork practicum. It is very important for the learner to take the theory and the fieldwork seriously. So in BSWL 104, learner will get an understanding about the various settings in social work. The learner should be able to understand where fieldwork is being practiced and which are the various settings where social work may be employed. It is also very important to understand the limitations. 15 days or 20 days of fieldwork is a very less number of days to understand the vast setting of social work to be employed. But so the limitations here is the student has to be very open about the agency, their working, and there are also certain limitations of their individual limitations, like the student or the learner may go to the field with their own preconceived notions. So all these notions has to be avoided. They should go to the field with an open mind and their judgment should not be biased. Also, there are certain limitations of the agency. So agency will have their different working timing and the learner has to follow the timings of the agency. Fieldwork practicum journal which is provided to the learner has to be used very meaningfully, and it is also very important to note that fieldwork in BSWG program is mandatory, attendance is mandatory. So it is very important for the learner to meet the fieldwork supervisor regularly and take guidance while during their fieldwork practicum. Let us discuss now the details of the various fieldwork settings. Certain broad fieldwork settings are the health settings, which consist of the hospitals, community health centers, primary health centers, clinics. We also have civic administration like social welfare departments, education departments, health departments, municipal offices, panchayat offices, collectorates. Fieldwork may also be conducted in the educational settings like school, colleges, non-formal adult education settings, and of course there are open communities where one can undergo or observe the projects with women, children, projects on education, sanitation, potable drinking water, health, self-help groups, and community services. We also have correctional services where fieldwork may be done, of course with prior permission. Under correctional settings, we have the prisons, the police stations, homes established under the juvenile justice system, the training schools, and the administration of parole services. And also fieldwork settings include the program implementations like the midday meal scheme, immunization projects, family planning projects, projects on immunization, malaria, HIV, etc. Other fieldwork settings consist of the media houses like print media, newspaper, electronic media, TV, news channel, online media, government-owned, private-owned. Also, one can explore the faith-based organizations like churches, mosques, gurudwara, Ramakrishna missions, missionaries of charities, etc. And definitely fieldwork may also be done in the courts, family courts, district courts, sessions courts. Other fieldwork settings includes NGOs working with women, children, aged, and also NGOs working in the field of education. We also have protective homes like shelter homes for victims of prostitution, Nari Niketans, etc. Palliative care centers are there, hospice care centers, orphanages. Fieldwork may also be done in the home for destitute, disaster afflicted refugees and migrants. We also have de-addiction and rehabilitation centers. There are homes for weaker sections like women, children, beggars, elderly, and of course, fieldwork can also be explored in the corporate sector, in the corporate social responsibility, which is a part of all the corporates. Pre-term self-assessment form. So this is a kind of a questionnaire which is provided in the Fieldwork Practicum journal. This questionnaire is basically to have an understanding of the learner in social work and especially in the fieldwork. It is important for the learner to fill up this form going for the first meeting or induction meeting with the fieldwork supervisor. And the questionnaire is to be used for the purpose of testing the attitude, skills and knowledge related to social work. So here there is no marking done, there is no right or wrong answers, and learners are not evaluated on this basis. Next, the Fieldwork Practicum Journal provides a log sheet. So log sheet is kind of a attendance marking system where the learner will sign in the respective dates. They will write the date of induction meeting, the dates of the orientation visits, and the dates of individual conferences, and those columns should be signed by the learner and countersigned by the supervisor. The log sheet is very important. Next, we come to the individual conference report. Individual conference, one-to-one discussion between the learner and the fieldwork supervisor regarding the problems associated with fieldwork, how to go about fieldwork, and attending a minimum of 5 individual conferences are compulsory. Learner can of course write more than 5 individual conference reports, and this is basically to ensure that fieldwork happens under the guidance of a fieldwork supervisor, because unsupervised fieldwork is not accepted. So before starting the orientation visits, it is essential to meet the supervisor and also discuss regarding the organizations chosen for orientation visits. And here the learner has to discuss the process of fieldwork, the learning plan, how to write reports, etc. with the fieldwork supervisor. So the purpose of induction meeting is manifold. Induction meeting is done with the academic counselor or fieldwork supervisor allotted by the study center, and it is the responsibility of the learner to meet the supervisor and seek guidance for writing fieldwork, and the learner is supposed to prepare a draft of the fieldwork and then do corrections, show it to the supervisor, then mark the corrections, the final thing in the journal. And it is also very important for the learner to write the Fieldwork Practicum journal in own words or language. So the report of the induction meeting consists of the date, time, name of the supervisor, detailed report, the kind of discussions that happened, when was the report or the induction meeting happened, comments by the fieldwork supervisor, and then signature by the fieldwork supervisor. Now coming to the orientation visits, there are several objectives of orientation visits. Orientation visits enable observational skills of the learner. It develops a spirit of inquiry. It also helps the learner to understand the societal responses to social problems through various means. And it also helps the learner to understand, appreciate, and develop an ability to critically evaluate the initiative of voluntary and government programs. It helps the learner to develop an appreciation for social work intervention in these programs by recording relevant information about the client system and the problem. So the selection of programs or the strategies for solving the problem is very important, and orientation visits also enable the learner to find out the role of social worker and its relevance to the client's needs and the problem. The relationship between the micro problems and macro problems are explored during orientation visits, and also how far the organization's resources and the nature of interventions are appropriate, what are the gaps to identified, and what are the suggestions. So all these requirements or objectives are met through orientation visits. How the report of orientation visits is written? First and foremost, the name of the organization or the name of the setting is important. One has to write the name of the institution, the address, what is the mission of that organization, objectives, institutional objectives, who are the people who are working in the organization, like chief executive officer or the board members, and what kind of programs the organization is running, and who are the beneficiaries for whom the NGO is working. So number and nature of beneficiaries, and in which geographical area is the organization working, and whether the organization is registered or not. Then the learner has also to write this organizational structure. So can explore the history of the organization also, when was the organization set up, and what were the major achievements and sources of funding. So what kind of infrastructure facilities the organization is having, like in terms of building, transport facilities, communication aids, the audio video equipments, and what is the relationship of the NGOs with other agencies, like other social welfare agencies, or relationship with the government agency departments, or relationship with the Panchayati Raj institutions, relationship with the other community based organizations. So these kind of relationship can also be explored, and whether the organization is facing any problems and what are the proposed remedies. So what are the future plans of the organization, and whether the organization has received any awards or recognition, whether it is affiliated or not, and any other information based on the observation of the learner. It is also very important that during the orientation visit, the learner should write about their own experiences and their observations. So what the learner learned from that particular day's visit, and any new knowledge or exposure, experience that the learner may have gained, and what is the experience of the learner in going as a team member for learning, because most of the time in the study center, students are going as a team, visiting the organization as a team of 3, 4, 5 people, students. So how was the experience about it, and what was the learner's observations about the agency, staff, and the particular day's activity. So this is a pro forma which is provided in the Fieldwork Practicum journal regarding the orientation visit. So one has to write the date, time, the nature of the organization, and the kind of work that was done in that particular orientation visit, and then the future plan, the learning objectives that the learner seeks from the supervisor. So these are the kind of details the orientation visit report. Next comes, so here likewise 20 orientation visits in 20 different fieldwork settings or organization has to be completed by the learner, and 20 different reports have to be written by the learner. So after all the reports of orientation visits are written and all the reports of individual conferences are written, next comes self-evaluation report. So self-evaluation report is very important. It is a brief report that has to be written by the learner regarding the fieldwork, the experience the learner gained during the first semester of the Fieldwork Practicum according to the set parameters, namely the knowledge, skills, attitude, and development of professional self. So since in the BSW first semester, the learners are going to the fieldwork for the first time, there may be many apprehensions about what is social work, how it is practiced, and what is expected of the learner, what are the objectives of fieldwork. And initially the learner may have no knowledge regarding fieldwork or social work per se. So the fieldwork practicum in the first semester is framed in such a manner that the learner gets adequate exposure of the different fieldwork settings. So while visiting these 20 different fieldwork settings, the learner is expected to gain certain knowledge about fieldwork practicum, about social work, the area of social work, the learner is expected to develop certain attitude, because initially as a fresher to social work program, there may be no attitude towards social work profession, but after visiting the 20 orientation visits, after doing the 20 orientation visits, the learner is expected to develop a certain attitude and also development of professional self. It is also very important that initially, what is professionalism? The learner may not have any idea of professionalism, but since social work is a professional course, so it is very important also to develop an attitude of professional self, and this kind of reflection is important. So the self-evaluation report by the student has to be written in terms of these parameters. So the format of the self-evaluation report is also provided. So the knowledge gained, the attitude developed, the development of professional self, all these categories are provided, and the learner has to write the report accordingly and present it to the supervisor for correction. The learner has to provide the summary report. It is a gist of the fieldwork that has been done during the first semester. One has to mention the name of the setting and the date in which the fieldwork was done. So that is a summary report. And then the summary report of the individual conference. So here 5 individual conference minimum is expected. So the learner has to write the topic, the place that was discussed during this 5 individual conference and the date. So this summary report has to be written. There is a term and self-assessment form. This is the same questionnaire which was provided as pre-term self-assessment form during the beginning of the fieldwork practicum. And so after undergoing the 20 orientation visits, the same form has to be filled again, and before submitting the fieldwork journal to the fieldwork supervisor, learner is expected to fill the term and self-assessment form. So learner has to compare the response they have written earlier and then in the pre and post self-assessment form. So this will give an idea to the learner about where they stand after the completion of 1 semester of the training in social work education and the training which includes both theory and practicum. And finally, there is a checklist before submission of the fieldwork practicum. The learner has to tick mark in this checklist. It consists of reading the program guide thoroughly, then attending induction meeting, attending individual conferences, attending orientation visits, and writing the self-evaluation report, filling up the pre and post self-assessment form, then also self-evaluation report, summary reports. So all these checklist has to be checked by the learner before final submission. So if there is further information required, learner can write to bswinfo@ignou.ac.in. So this session summarizes the fieldwork practicum journal, how to conduct fieldwork during the first semester of BSWG program offered by the School of Social Work at Indira Gandhi National Open University. Thank you.